first thing, contract arrangement I got was with the De- Department of Communications, what it was called then. Was the trial operation of ethnic broadcasting in Melbourne and in Sydney, and I took a big risk and took a lease on 35 Bank Street and built studios in there on the basis of a 12-month contract, which nobody knew whether Fraser was going to cut it off or what he was going to do with it. And in Sydney, we leased the old 2SM studios in Clarence Street. So fortunately, but it didn't just go into lots of long terms. It went into, I think, another 2 years and then 2 years and things like that. But the end result, and looking back, was it was about 11 years I was running that, as you know. And in all of that, I used to, apart from my normal arrangement to provide the broadcasting things, I also bought two of these 16-track Tascam machines and put a music studio in the ground floor of 35 Bank Street, which 3A could use as well. And I mean, it was, I wanted to have, I bought things like toys. I think that was my biggest problem, was buying things. And then finding out how to pay for them. However, so we recorded quite a lot of ethnic groups and for broadcasting, which is pretty good. And I think they appreciated that. And during that period was when I formed a group to apply for the license, FM license, for what became Eon FM. And that was a group of people that I organised between Bill Conn, who's married to my niece. His job was the finance, and my job was to get the other side of it going. So he got the Melbourne Herald on board. Of all the funny things, the Gas and Fuel Corporation, because they were one of his clients who were happy to put some money in. But it wasn't something that everybody rushed and said, hey, I want to be in that, because they had to tip quite a lot of money in. And nobody knew much about FM other than the people that, so to speak, knew about it, knew its benefits. And I had a consortium consisting of, I had LRB, I had Glenn Wheatley, Paul Datey, Smacker Fitzgibbon, Barry Humphries, Tiki and John, who had the biggest restaurant in Melbourne. We thought it was a showbiz application. That's what it became known as. And we were up against, there were 9 applicants for 2 licenses. And we were up against David Syme company, in fact, which in fact was my old studio. And Ron Tudor was involved in that opposition to me. And AWA in Sydney put in an application which I thought was very well done and good. And then, or other applications, but we had we looked for it was sort of like a law court. Everyone had a barrister, and it was like a courtroom. And our barrister was a guy called Woods Lloyd, who was a QC, but a very jovial person, a bit like Rumpole, full of humour and fun. And he's always telling jokes. And I remember he got me in a corner one day and he said, look, there's 9 licences and there's 2 people going to get them. So out there are 8 people that don't like you, but don't take any notice of it. Don't let it worry you. It was good advice because, you suddenly get out there and like people are saying, oh, look, you don't know what you're doing, whatever. And we, pulled a bit of humour into it and run. People were always putting up all their best sides and one of the applicants was put up their list of all the people they're going to have on their station playing music of Australian artists and things. And Smacker was my best friend, and I'd made all these records of him and things. And I said, oh, it's funny, Smacker's not on the list. And of course, Woods Lloyd gets up and says, oh, it's very interesting, Mr. Dr. Panham, he was the QC. But why have you left off one of our clients on your list? He introduced a sort of fun into it. All the others were very serious about, I got tacked on the equipment that mixing or recording equipment was not the state of the art and that. And, I said, oh, well, it's what we run 3EA and 2EA with, it's broadcast stations are running quite well with all this gear. What are you talking about? So they, like, I found out later, the way lawyers and barristers work, they go down the path, and if they get barreled up, they switch on to another path. And so they go down an attack, and if it doesn't work, they move on. And it was interesting observing all this. And the other funny thing about it was that when you'd have a recession and you'd all go out, all these barristers that are tearing strips off each other in there are all mates, and they're all, are you going at golf or whatever? You think, hang on, this is like all the gangsters are out there talking to each other. I thought it was very funny. Anyway, to cut all that short, we got a licence, and what became Fox got the other licence. Our company was called Melbourne FM Radio Proprietary Limited, and I think Fox was called Broadcast FM. But in finishing up and talking about that, both stations went to air. We were the first ones to go to air. And the very reason why we got on air first was because everybody in our consortium was in it, hands-on. Neil McRae was chief engineer, and Clyde Simpson came from 3AW as the sales director. People like Barry Humphries came on and talked on the station. He did commercials, and he had Smacker, and everybody who was a shareholder contributed into running or getting a station going. The Herald and Weekly Times, for argument's sake. We had the use of their tower to put out. We could put our array on their tower, and how we got on the air quickly was when we got the licence. We bought the only transmitter in Melbourne at that moment was a Harris transmitter, and we bought it straight away. And we put it into my offices in Bank Street, and we had a little play where we got it all lined up, and Jeff Tomes, who was the chief engineer, virtually on a coat hanger, we actually fired it up, and we're broadcasting to South Melbourne in FM, illegally, of course. But we had a little ceremony of that with Barry Humphries and the Minister for Communications, who was, I'll think of his minute, he was there, and I think Glenn Wheatley and a few others. Staley was the minister, and I knew him quite well. And he came down out of his ministerial office and came in there, and he was, of course, a great Humphreys fan. And we had a little private ceremony of going on the air privately, illegally, with the minister there, so we didn't have a real problem. With regard to the Eon FM licence, when of course, I'd sold out of, when I sold out of Eon FM, I got a call from Michael Duffy, who's he was then in the Hawke government, the Minister for Communications, and a great jazz fan and friend of mine. And he rang me up one day and said, the Australian Broadcasting Authority, or Tribunal, Australian ABT, is the chairman. No, what's her name? Deirdre O'Connor, sorry. So Deirdre O'Connor spoken to him and said, they're looking for the deputy chairman, but she doesn't want to have a solicitor. She'd like to have somebody out of the industry. And so Michael, one of those funny calls you get, he said, would you like to be the chairman of the Broadcasting Authority Tribunal? Oh, you don't get these sort of offers very often where the minister in charge of broadcasting says, you want to be one of us? So I gave it a bit of thought and then agreed to do that. I went up to Sydney and met Deirdre O'Connor, had a talk with her, and we got along very well. And then I became deputy chairman, I bought an apartment in Sydney, and I was living in Melbourne with my family, so I'd go off on Monday and come back on Friday. But why I'm telling you this is that the chairman who heard the application for the licence that we eventually got at Eon FM, whose name escapes me for the moment, but whilst at the Broadcasting Tribunal on one occasion, they had a little drinky poo or get together with all of the ex-members of the Broadcasting Tribunal. And he was there, and he said, oh, I'll tell you something I couldn't tell you before. But when they had the applications in Melbourne, we decided to give you one licence, and it was a matter of deciding who was going to get the other one, which was very complimentary for our application. They thought it was, he said, your application was by far the best, and it was just a matter of who else was going to get the other one. So that was very nice to hear, and complimentary to all the people that were part of my team. So that was the last bit of that. So the next thing, of course, was when we sold Eon FM to Triple M in Sydney, and that became the end of that. But that happened because we had an approach from the station in Adelaide. If they were interested in selling the station, and we also had offer from or discussion with Triple M in Rodmuir in Sydney, and all the negotiations were with Bill Conn, who was a superb negotiator, and the it got to the stage where Bill had organised a meeting with Rod Muir in Melbourne. I was actually overseas in London at the time, and the price has gone up to I think 33 million. Bear in mind that we started the company off with $1 million capital, and it was not going very well for a year, and we had to all chip in another $1 million, which ultimately was repaid because you can have what they call a return of capital. So in effect, it was a $1 million company, which we were getting $33 million for. I had 15% of it, which is not too bad, and we had a limitation in our portfolio that nobody could own more than 15%, and that was so that nobody could have control. So what happened then was decided, negotiated to sell it to Rod Muir, and I think they had problems in getting the money together, but their legal advisor, or their solicitor at the time, was Gonski. He's the man that's giving the Labor Party all their Cheerios at the moment about the new cost of living or whatever it is. Education, is it? Or so they were being very slow in responding with the money. And Bill Conn said, well, he said to me, will I ring Gonski and speak about it? And Bill said, well, look, the best way to put it is you ring him up and you say, if you're not going to settle it, Bill Conn and I are on an aeroplane tomorrow morning to go over to Adelaide and sign up a deal with AAA FM in Adelaide. Oh, things happened very quickly then. Anyway, he turned. We're as one was. If you're going to settle anything of that nature, you need all of the directors. In our case, I think 6. You all need to resign, and immediately the other side takes your shares. There's no interruption to the management running of the station. You can't all go and have the station with nobody in charge. So that's the way it works. So you hand over the shares, they give you the money, and then they own the station. And so that was all set up in Melbourne. Then they were an hour late. They turned up with a film crew. A guy from Channel 9, I've forgotten his name, with a moustache. Anyway, and they sat along there, and Ron Muir was saying, oh, this is Gas and Fuel Corporation. Here's your cheque. This sort of terrible arrogance. I mean, I'm sitting here with, like, Bill Conn is an extremely good gentleman. Neil McRae, who you probably met as equally, and from Albert's, Brian Byrne, who was the director of Albert's, and a delightful man, having these cheques thrown at them and all this crap, you know. And so we'd set up some food and stuff at the station to welcome them back as the new owners and that. And as they finished paying everyone, and they didn't give Wheatley his cheque because he was staying, which all shocked us. he wasn't resigning as a director, he was going to remain a director with Muir. And as they departed, they said, none of you can come back into the station ever again. End of story. In other words, we thought we were going to be gentlemen and say, look, come in and have a drink and meet the staff, and these are the new people that own it. No one's allowed, we don't want you back in the building anymore. That all went. So I remember Brian Burns from Elvis and I went up, had a meal somewhere. We were a bit down and disgusted. I mean, we had the money. I had $5 million, you know. But it was sort of a nasty taste. But I mean, it basically had the money.